welcome to another episode of the Alter Your Health podcast, your source of information and inspiration to promote the holistic transformation of your health and the health of our planet. Here we've got a great episode with Dr. Ben Reebs, another Dr. Ben, and Dr. Ben and I have a lot of similarities that kind of overlap in a very interesting way, and this is a really great episode. I really enjoyed connecting with Dr. Ben Reebs. He was actually a classmate of mine. We overlapped for some years at the National University of Natural Medicine in Portland, Oregon, which is, by the way, the oldest naturopathic medical school accredited program in the country, in North America. And Dr. Ben and I both have maintained a really strong connection with traditional naturopathic medicine, really what has been called and what we call both kind of this vitalistic approach to health and medicine and healing. And we talk a little bit in this discussion about what that means, that word vitalism, which is kind of ambiguous and nebulous and hard to hold on to. We kind of do our best anyways to define that. And what I really appreciated about this conversation is that it was really just a conversation, really an exploration, not as much of a, point and shoot interview, question answer kind of thing, but a lot of brainstorming and a lot of ideas that surfaced. And I hope that, you can sit back and enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Another thing that I really enjoyed about this conversation with Dr. Ben, it's funny saying conversation with Dr. Ben because I wasn't talking to myself. I was talking to Dr. Ben Reebs, of course, but I really enjoyed his highly individualized approach to health and healing. And of course, I know that health and healing, the healing journey is a highly individualized process, but the way that he preserves that notion and that in even his conversation, and I'm sure he preserves that in his treatment plans, obviously. But I was trying so hard to get a nugget of information that would maybe be applicable to anyone listening, and I finally did get some nuggets that were applicable to everyone. But the focus and the takeaway is that there is no one-size-fits-all anything, and the health and healing process is highly individualized, and that is what traditional naturopathic medicine really does best, is honing in on that highly individualized journey. And you can learn more about Ben Reebs at his website, drreebs.com. That's DREEBS.com. Without further ado, I just encourage you to sit back and enjoy this enlightening conversation with Dr. Ben Reebs. Dr. Ben Reebs, really happy to have you in the studio, in the Alter Your Health studio. That's the name of the podcast, by the way. It's Alter Your Health. And welcome to the podcast. You got to hold this one up.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Welcome to the podcast. Really excited to dive into things because I don't really know you that well, but I know that we have a lot of things that kind of mesh together well, and we have been into some similar things, one of which, of course, being naturopathic medicine and our philosophy around it, which we're going to dive into. But I just want to know kind of the snapshot of how you have come into the world of naturopathic medicine, and specifically, like me, maintaining this vitalistic traditional connection throughout it.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.
It's really fun to be here. I think it just happened about 12 or 13 years ago. It was after I had lived at the Esalen Institute in Big Sur for a couple of years as head cook, and studied with hundreds and hundreds of teachers, of all walks of life. And I had never heard of naturopathic medicine. And a really dear friend at the time in San Francisco, I saw her life completely transformed through working with a naturopath. And one day I said to her, what happened to you? And she's like, oh, my naturopath literally helped me figure out what was wrong. And I was like, naturopathic medicine, what the heck is that? And it kind of began this quest of really looking into it. And at that time I was kind of depressed. I was trying a lot of different things, mostly in the field of sustainability and marketing and food.
In terms of your career.
In terms of my career,
life.
Yeah. Music and food, and I was really into business. And at that time, I was really looking at the healing arts as a field for me to get into. So
you dove in.
I dove in.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because similarly, I grew up in Arizona, actually, and Arizona is a pretty big place for naturopathic medicine, as we know. And I went to the University of Arizona, where there's a big kind of conventional medical school, of course. And that's all I saw. I had no idea that naturopathic medicine existed, despite living in really one of the hot spots on the West Coast for naturopathic medical practice. It was kind of blind to me, but I just, someone pointed me as well. Super cool. So how about, how and why has the vitalistic traditional naturopathic thing been so important to you? Because when you talked about your friend who was kind of touched, what was that like? Was that your first exposure to naturopathic medicine being this vitalistic practice, or?
Well, I grew up here in the Pacific Northwest. I was born about 10 miles from here, actually. But I grew up in the woods without any electricity or running water for 13 years. And so I just was completely immersed in nature my entire life, up until the age of 20, basically. Wow. I was homeschooled, and so I'd pump all of my water by hand.
Dang.
We built our house. My dad built it, and I helped him. And we lived in military canvas tents for 2 years while we were building the house. And so every morning I'd get up and build a campfire at the age of like 7. So I didn't know anything but nature. And so I think that's probably where I first experienced vitalism. And I didn't even know what it was. I just could feel it in nature.
Could you tell us more about that feeling? Because I think I know what you're talking about, and I think probably some people know what you're talking about, being in nature and feeling vitalism, but still that word is kind of hard for me even sometimes to wrap my mind around. I mean, I get it, but it's different for us all.
Yeah, it's funny because even as you're asking me and as I'm talking about it, it makes me realize, do I even really know what I'm talking about? And I've never really connected the two, like the word vitalism to my experience. It's like I just think of it as being, in the womb of nature or close to nature, kind of like in Taoism or like in Big Sur, living at Esalen. I know you have some experience there, and I'd love to hear about that.
Sure, yeah.
I think feeling this life around us and feeling like not alone, even though I may be alone in the woods. There's this intelligence. I've studied quantum physics a lot, and it feels like there's this wave, this potential, this field of information that is alive in the roots of naturopathic medicine as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's really hard to put your finger on exactly what it is. As with any profound anything, it's an experience that you have to kind of feel. But if you haven't felt the aliveness that nature invites us to feel, then that's just more of a reason to go out and put your feet on the earth, in my opinion. Super cool about your upbringing. It reminds me of Captain Fantastic. Did you ever see that movie?
I don't think I've seen that one.
What?
Isn't that a Marvel movie?
No.
Okay.
That's, I think, Captain America.
Okay. I have not seen Captain Fantastic.
Oh, man.
I've heard it's really good.
Put it on your list because as you were describing your childhood, pumping water, building a house, being off the grid, it's just about this family, and it's really inspirational and touching. I'm sure, you'd kind of feel connection through that. I just have to ask, any visions or dreams of returning to that sort of lifestyle after you've been a city dweller now So how does that feel, and what do you see yourself doing, and how do you see yourself living moving forward?
That's a really good question. I you know how as we grow up, like I had a period where I kind of turned away from it, and I was like, okay, now I need to have my city experience. And it's sort of like I had to turn away from that return to nature, that being so close to the woods, and feeling like I wanted to get more sophisticated, or especially being homeschooled in the woods, and all of the connotations that entails. I think that my lifelong mission is to kind of bring that into my life wherever I'm at. And so I'm always working to try to bring that back. And I think that's like a part of me that feels like it's being fed at times. And then other times I don't feel like I'm being fed, and I feel like I'm starving. I'm like, I need to be in nature.
Totally.
And not be around, I'm just so addicted to my cell phone.
Me too. Yeah. I hear you. I hear you loud and clear, Ben. I no wonder why we share the same first name. So yeah, how do you these days maintain that connection while living in the city? You're in Portland, Oregon. Nature, we can kind of see it. We can see the mountain, but how do you day to day maintain a connection to nature?
Yeah, I think it's an ongoing quest for me on a daily basis. And my fiance Maria, she has we have a big garden in the back, and she has a kind of a green thumb, so she's always growing things, and that brings me a lot of joy. And so a lot of our meals are prepared with whatever was growing. Yeah. And here it goes deep into the fall, and sometimes even into the early winter, where she can pull up some root vegetables, and that's like one way that that seems to really help for me. I've had periods in my life where I spent a lot of time meditating, spending a couple hours or maybe 20 minutes a day, depending on the day. And I'm now in a phase where I'm not doing that as much, but I'm sure that'll return. And that definitely brought me a lot of joy and connection.
Yeah. Well, the food is definitely the way that I always find is the easiest way to connect with nature. Whether we like it or not, food does come from nature, at least hopefully it does, right? Hopefully it's not synthetic food. So yeah, it is, every time we eat, that's a great reminder that every time we eat, even if we're not growing it, we can kind of have we can kind of touch and grab onto this vague connection with nature, putting it into our mouth and chewing, and kind of knowing that natural force that has gone into the cultivation of this nourishment is now becoming part of us. It's almost like a spiritual experience, or it could be, Yeah. Cool. So, do you want to say any more about your time at Esalen? I know how many years were you there?
I was there 18 or 19 months. Okay. So I know I said 2 years earlier. It was a little shorter than 2 years, but yeah. It felt like kind of a lifetime, I'd say.
Yeah. So I know you were a cook there, or maybe the cook, or however you define that.
Yeah, I was just one of the cooks, but I became a head cook, so I would run the entire kitchen when I was there. So, and I became a head baker, so I'd bake for the entire community.
So you were using food from the garden and natural ingredients, and really putting, obviously Esalen is totally connected with nature because it's pretty much off the grid in a lot of ways. But you were even more so not hands on the earth, pulling the roots maybe some days, but yeah, you were really maintaining that connection, which is awesome. It sounds like that has been a line that you've connected with today,
Big time. I think at the age of 5 or 6, I was making bread, and I'd be on the floor, kneading my bread in a big bowl. And my parents joked and said it was Ben's best bread. And I just brought, I baked my whole life. And then my mom just threw me into the kitchen at that age of 4, 5, 6, and she let me play. And so I just cooked every day. And so when I got to Esalen, there were all these amazing cooks there, from, Culinary Institute of America, and they were on residencies from different institutes, and they all became my friends. And I was like, you guys teach me what you know. So they teach me how to julienne carrots, they teach me how to make a mirepoix, for a soup, all these things. And I just was like a little kid in in the candy store. I was like an alchemist, just playing. And of course, at first I started out as a dishwasher in the duck pond. And so I had to learn how to, wash all of the dishes for 300 people. And then I got to sort of slowly move my way up,
Yeah. Super cool.
Yeah.
I'll just share a brief Esalen story of mine if I could. I was only there for an immersion of 1 month, like a yoga teacher training. And it was definitely during this time of my life where everything was really ripe and I was just so malleable, and that was such an impressionable experience that month at Esalen, feeling so connected with nature in so many ways, like we've already touched upon. But I remember leaving Esalen and going back to Los Angeles, where I was living at the time, which is, talk about like a shock. Even after a month, it was just like a kind of this wave of, what the hell am I doing? Where the hell am I? Why can't this Esalen fairy tale life be forever? And I was meditating one morning, kind of upon this desire to maintain a connection with the experience and the feelings that I had while at Esalen. And I, one of the things that I was really desiring to connect with, like we talked about, was nature, and which seemed so difficult, next to impossible to do in Los Angeles. And I was outside meditating, and I opened my eyes, and the first thing that I made contact with my vision was this lizard staring me dead in the eyes, like as if he was telling me, dude, we're in nature, we're connected right now, like you can't escape nature. So I've kind of used that experience to remind me during the times of feeling like disconnected, being in city life, that we're in nature. We are natural beings. We are in nature. Sometimes we like to create barriers that are physical or just illusions in our mind, but we are very much natural beings thriving in nature, and that was an impactful moment, hammering that home for me. Yeah.
I love that story. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, Esalen has maintained a really close place to my heart. Just mainly going back for brief visits since then. Never an extended stay, even though it's kind of still on the to-do list, even at this point in my life. But who knows? Yeah. But was just most recently back in Big Sur in March for my wedding. We got married down the road from Esalen. So
that's so awesome. Were you at one of the parks, or?
No, we were going to get married at Pfeiffer Beach, but it was kind of like a awesome, amazing sunny Saturday, and Pfeiffer Beach was just flooded with people. So we had a backup plan, and the backup plan was just actually at the place where we were staying, which was, oh my gosh, I'm blanking. Glen. Oh man, sorry. Some place right by the Big Sur River. It was just, It was really beautiful.
That's awesome. Gosh,
it'll come back to me. Well, I want to kind of dive in and shift a little bit into like medicine, because that's what this podcast is about, is like understanding health and healing on kind of a macro perspective, so we can kind of create more health on an individual and collective level. So when we're talking about vitalism and talking about this connection with nature and this kind of, I describe it as just like the force of nature. How do we use that to support healing in your experience and your practice? Like, what are some tools where you like turn up the vital force to promote the healing process?
Gosh, well, there's a couple of ideas that popped into my mind the moment you asked that question, and they're completely connected. I believe they come from the same kernel, so to speak. And I was thinking about this a little bit even today. And one of the ways that I approach my patients or clients is not as a particle, but as a wave. In other words, treat the whole person. It's on a quantum level. It's not just, I'm going to focus in on your mind, or I'm going to focus in on your heart or your leg. It's the whole person. And it's just like Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, where we can't measure the momentum of an electron and its position at the same time. We can only get one. And there's also this idea of the observer effect, where our observation in science literally changes the outcome. And I know I'm kind of jumping around here a bit, but
no, please.
Light is an electromagnetic spectrum. It's a frequency of emissions of vibrations, and we are too. We are literally, on a quantum level, we are literally a wave form. We're a potential. We're a plenum, or a plenary, or we're a human potential. And the vital force is all about, in my experience, all about that potential. Whereas like homeostasis is more like the healthy status quo in the body. Everything's kind of maintaining equilibrium. Potassium and chloride and sodium are all kind of balancing intracellularly and extracellularly. Whereas the vital force is on a different level. It's more on that potential wave-like level, that quantum level. And that's where I start with my patients.
You start with that sort of conversation. You just all right. So you're a wave. I know. You thought you were just particulate matter, but you're actually a wave, and and this is what I'm going to do with you. Oh gosh, I'm sure they don't go running out the door. They're like, all right, let's do this, Dr. Ben. So what? So that's awesome. So what does that mean though, on a kind of practical terms? I love how you're thinking. But then when it comes to like what you're doing.
Right. Well, for me, it starts even before they walk in the door. And Dr. Sensenig of the Naturopathic Medicine Institute really teaches about intention as a modality.
Yeah.
And I know it's in all the religions, it's in all the spiritual teachings. And I mean, there's nothing new under the sun, as Shakespeare said. So this idea, though, is that I'm a part of the treatment. I'm part of this wave. And so like I'll even pray or set some intentions before they come in. And then when I see them, because I'm looking at them as a wave, what I mean is I'm looking at them as a whole person on a spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical level. And I'm seeing all those parts as connected, as part of this wave. And so whatever we're going to do together is like dropping a stone into a pool. It's going to cause ripples across the whole wave. I'm not explaining it very well, but in other words, I'm not going to focus in on, let's just do turmeric for your inflammation. It's more like, here, let's take a homeopathic that matches the pattern of your wave right now, and let's do a couple other things and see how the synergies of these things work together.
Totally. So, I mean, I'm right there with you, because a lot of people, I love the term cookbook medicine, where, you've like, I've got this symptom and let's see what the treatment is, which is totally how our culture, society functions, right? I mean, Dr. Google does a really good job of saying these herbs for this condition, probably better than I could do. So I love the idea. So it's essentially where you're coming from is, what you're saying is it's an individualized, highly individualized process. And are you always using a homeopathic to kind of match the wave, so to speak?
I am not, actually. I use a homeopathic probably about 2/3 of the time, and then sometimes it's just not indicated, or doesn't seem to be appropriate, or maybe it's not right for them. But I believe that sometimes homeopathy even works even if you don't give it. And that kind of goes to this observer effect that is, this is in science. Like, I might sound really woo-woo here, but like all of the
that
science,
is like the definition of woo-woo.
It kind of is. Yeah, it really is.
But
You're totally right.
But that is totally awesome, because I think that in order to evolve kind of collectively, we need to think outside the box, which is, I hate that term, because like there's no box, but we need to push the woo-woo spectrum off the charts sometime, just to kind of break it open. So feel free to woo-woo, knock yourself out with woo-woo.
I love that. We got to woo-woo ourselves off the charts. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Buckminster Fuller, he had 47 honorary doctorates, and he coined the term synergy back in the, 60s or 70s. He was the founder of synergetics. And for those of you who don't know what synergy is, it's basically that, two objects have forces that, when combined, produce forces that are greater than the sum of their parts.
1 + 1 = 3.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's how I believe this naturopathic medicine really works. I believe that, let's say I give a homeopathic, Nux Vomica 200C to my patient, and then let's say I give them maybe a trace mineral supplement, and then maybe I do one cervical adjustment. Like, those three things on them in that moment are going to have a synergistic effect on the wave of their being, that if I did it with the right intention, or with some intention, then it's going to do things that I can't even imagine. And that's up to the vital force. It's up to them, and it's up to the universe. I'm actually just a medium or a channel. Like, I'm there, or a guide. I'm not doing the healing. I'm not a healer. The body heals itself with assistance from all of these forces, in my opinion. I don't know. What do you think about that?
That's a great question. I mean, I love where you're coming from in terms of everything playing a part in this synergistic adjustment of health. And that's where personally I get really frustrated with, because we're not in a place where we can come up with any evidence-based scientific claims around what we're doing sometimes. Right. Despite how real it is, because we can see it with our own two eyes and feel it with every cell in our body, right? We can know it, but we can't, but we're to some extent collectively limited by this box of evidence-based practice, evidence-based medicine, where, there's not going to be any sort of study anytime soon that shows you the cervical adjustment and the trace minerals and the Nux Vomica 200C is the ideal treatment for this patient and anyone who looks like that patient, because obviously it's just ridiculous to try to formulate any sort of reasonable study to show something like that. So that's what I'm kind of, and which is frustrating because I'm right there with you about all of these synergistic treatments that are highly individualized with potentized intention to kind of drive it on the part of the, clinician or healer and the part of the client. And yet it's frustrating because, it's the only thing that's frustrating to me is this, there's got to be a level of acceptance to some extent. Really when it comes down to it, just has to be the acceptance of the participant, the client, and the acceptance of the provider and their kind of own, being on the same wavelength. But what are your thoughts about where we are collectively, societally? Because to me, it feels like, to some extent, a barrier, or at least a lot of resistance to really kind of make this model more mainstream. But I don't know if mainstream is really what we're going for, so feel free to talk on any of that.
Yeah, wow. Obviously we're in kind of a bubble here in Portland. This is like a capital of alternative medicine, and the Bay Area has some bubbles too, and there's bubbles all over the country and all over the world. But there's places where it's really not nearly as accepted or accepted at all. And just touching a little bit on homeopathy, for those of who don't know, there are hundreds and hundreds of studies out there now showing quantum particles, like nanoparticles, that are active in the formulas of the homeopathics. Mm-hmm. So these literally, they're operating even though they're below Avogadro's constant, and they're not in the cause-effect Newtonian mechanistic evidence-based model. There's actually plenty of quantum evidence that they're acting, and we don't fully understand how they work yet, but there's something going on. Anyway, I think I'm a huge fan of science and of evidence-based medicine. And, there's the famous question, well, whose evidence are we talking about? And so there's the evidence that happens in the clinic with particular patients and them getting better. And there's evidence that happens in our own personal experiences that's more empirical, and then there's evidence that's in a randomized controlled trial that may be paid for by some interests that are invested in a certain outcome. But I do think that right now this what we're talking about is kind of going mainstream. I really think. You've talked to hundreds of people, I'm sure, about this. I know I have, and it seems like there's a shift happening right now. And I don't think I'm just making it up. I really feel. You see it in social media.
Yeah.
Just in the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel it's driven by where we are. We're in dire straits, right? And clearly the model that we're functioning in, the scientific model that's driving, models upon models, the food and pharma model that's driving the scientific model, that's driving the medical model, it's all kind of a closed loop that's really not serving any sustainable, long-lasting, true, authentic outcomes. So I think a lot of people more and more are becoming aware of this. Like, we're not going anywhere. We're just spending a lot of money and just standing still. And I think there's more and more people who are coming aware of that, thanks to like a lot of documentaries and so a lot of these mainstream films and articles that are being published, which are wonderful. And at the same time, there's not a whole lot of traction to grab onto to like catapult any sort of alternative therapy, quote unquote, forward, just because we're still in this, another word that I don't like using, this paradigm, this way of thinking where we need the evidence. But you mentioned, there's hundreds of homeopathic research studies that I've done on homeopathics that have the quantum evidence, and there's outcomes, and it's just not the right flavor of evidence, I guess, that we want to see in today's world. So yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of reading about a physicist recently. I forget if it was Niels Bohr or one of the physicists, but he really believed that we had to renounce the cause-effect mechanistic worldview in order to see the quantum view. Mm-hmm. And I actually think he's wrong. I think that we don't have to renounce this in-the-box cause and effect way of thinking in order to expand and kind of include this other realm, that they both can coexist. And at the same time, a lot of the branded integrative medicine modalities and offerings and things that I see out there kind of are watered down, and like they don't really seem to really have an identity sometimes. So I guess I'm curious what you think about that, like integrative medicine and trying to bring the two worlds together, or...
Sure. Yeah. The question that I hear you asking is, do we bring these worlds together, or do we just like shatter the world and kind of create some new world or something? And, wow, what do we do? When it comes down to it, that a lot of the functional integrative medicine is very much allopathic, in the sense of, allopathic meaning other treatment or other pathology. So it's finding something wrong and fixing it. That's what doctors, like, quote unquote, that's what their education and what the whole, historically, that's kind of what they've done, is, diagnose a problem, find something wrong through whatever sort of expensive laboratory testing or whatnot being required, and then find a pill for it. But some of the, obviously sometimes there's pills that are safer and different, and they're marketed in another way, and they, have just vitamins and minerals and herbs and kind of things, but which obviously is going to have a safer and kind of more gentle, nourishing impact on the body, but it's still from this model of cause and effect. So back to the question that you asked me that I'm not answering. What do we do? Do we merge these worlds? That's a really good question, because I have felt, that one of my kind of missions is, beyond just working with people and supporting their health, it is really like the evolution of things and medicine. And to be quite honest, I think that the system kind of needs to crash and burn to some degree. And it's funny, when I said that, the next thing that came to mind was kind of the state of the economy and politics. It's all kind of in a similar kind of dismantled situation where things just aren't working that well anymore. And maybe crash and burn is not like the right adjective, but I like, back to the Buckminster Fuller, is just creating another system that makes the old system obsolete and outdated. So maybe that's more of what I feel like my mission is just continuing to create this other system so that people can like jump ship and play this game rather than having to do with any part of that sinking ship that is very much seems to be a reality based on where I stand. I don't know.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
do you think, I mean, I feel like I'm always challenged by balancing this really kind of cynical and optimistic part of myself. Like, it's like, oh my gosh, the world sucks and it's going to hell in a handbasket. But at the same time, it's like, yes, like that's like we're exactly where we need to be. We're equipped with exactly what we need. And I'm curious about what your thoughts are. Is the state of the world, the state of medicine, maybe more specifically, do you think, in the state of health and healthcare, do you think it's as bad as I think it is? Or what do you, how do you think we're doing collectively in terms of health and medicine?
I agree with you 100%. I mean, I think it's just as bad as you say. And I mean, all we need to do is look at the statistics of chronic disease and the millions of new people with chronic disease every year. And the state of health and obesity and metabolic syndrome and diabetes and cardiovascular disease and on and on. And it's one reason you and I will never be out of business. And I know that sounds kind of cliche or sounds a little bit cynical. Yeah. But there are so many sick people. And unfortunately, this medicine is kind of like shopping at Whole Foods. It really is kind of a,
Could you say more? What do you mean by
what I mean
shopping
by
at
that?
Whole
I mean,
Foods?
it's expensive, and there are only 6,000 NDs in the world or in North America. And then there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of other alternative medicine practitioners, integrative medicine practitioners, functional medicine doctors, LMTs, LACs, you name it. Mm-hmm. But really, there aren't that many of us relative to the 1 or 2 million NPs and MDs and PAs in North America. Mm-hmm. That are kind of in the allopathic model.
Yeah, one of the things that I see as one of the ways to start creating this alternative system that makes the old system obsolete is reworking everything in a way so that health is actually worth something other than just the feeling of being well. Like you can earn health credits that you can spend at the store or something. I just, have always kind of had this feeling like health, like here I am living this lifestyle, taking care of myself and really feeling good. And I wouldn't do it any other way, but there's no incentives other than the fact that I feel good, which apparently isn't enough of an incentive. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that there's any way to incentivize health?
That's a really good question. And I love your idea because, it reminds me of social media and the dopamine rush we get from, even if you're a Wazer, and you're reporting potholes and, on traffic, on streets to the Waze app, and then other people can know about the pothole, you get a little dopamine rush and you get like rewarded, right? And there's so many apps that reward us for kind of jumping through the hoops. And so like, how would we apply that to health without it turning into being about more debasing things? Like, just, body image, which can be really positive, but then it can also be taken in that negative way where it's just sexualized. And I mean, anyone can just flip through Instagram and and see that it seems to be that seems to be the way people are getting rewarded the most is through like looking really sexy and looking really good, which is great in and of itself. But it's like, how could we make it more?
I hear you, and at the same time, obviously, health is internal as well as external, right? The sexy people on Instagram may not have the best cholesterol numbers. Like, I don't know. But yeah, so what was your idea? Kind of, I mean, sorry to put you on the spot. This has turned into like a brainstorming. How do we take over the world?
Here's one thing I believe, and I believe that the future of medicine is going to lie in innate regenerative potential. In other words, I think that everything that James Mescal and New Health and functional medicine is trying to do, everything that epigenetics and MTHFR and Ben Lynch is trying to do and doing, everything that quantum physics is showing, everything that stem cell research is showing, and everything that vitalism has known for centuries is that it lies in the innate regenerative or healing potential, the vital force, the vis medicatrix. And so I think that it's going to have to be that. And I don't know how that, but I believe that's going to be the new model. And I haven't really thought it through that much.
Yeah, this is a brainstorming session, but that's okay. The way I see it is there's kind of this nugget of truth that is kind of, everything is kind of revolving around, like all this functional medicine stuff, all these herbs, all these supplements, the industry, it's all kind of revolving around this nugget of truth. And we just have to focus on that unwavering North Star that holds it all, which, if I'm hearing you correctly, and I agree, is the innate regenerative capacity of each life on this planet. And just fostering it, supporting it, bolstering it in natural, inexpensive, sustainable sort of ways, right?
Absolutely. And it kind of goes back to, like, I was looking at your website and how, like, at the very top, your tagline or what you say is, hey, like, the healing is inside of you and I'm here to show you. Let me show you. I mean, I'm paraphrasing.
Oh yeah. I think you are your own healer. Let me show you how.
Yeah. And it's like that. I mean, that right there kind of captures it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds kind of like a fairy tale or cliche, like, haha, like, yeah, actually, you're my healer, I'm paying you. But actually, no, listen, patient, listen, person, I'm doing nothing. I'm telling you this could help you. And you are integrating that sort of thinking, that sort of belief system, and these sort of lifestyle habits and patterns into your life. And your body is doing the work, and it's doing the work with the vital force, the vis medicatrix. Yeah. Excellent. Well, I want to kind of take an opportunity to get into some of and we kind of skirted around this question before, but how about any sort of day-to-day lifestyle practices, diet, nutrition, mindfulness, exercise, things that you see as being staples for people, or like, cornerstones to support the vital force working optimally in someone's life, in someone's body. So in other words, are there any prescriptions, so to speak, that can hold true across the board for most individuals that might come to see Dr. Ben Reebs?
I think that one of them would be, and this could be on a physical or a mental or a emotional level, but I think that physical is the easiest, is to identify the one or two or three things that are toxic to my epigenetic, digestive, basically to my genes. In other words, what things turn on the cancer genes in my body? For me, personally, it's dairy. Like, I can't even have ghee, like organic grass-fed ghee, without it causing toxemia in my body and leading to symptoms. And so I had 2 severe chronic diseases until I discovered that. And now I'm cured of those 2 severe chronic diseases. And I almost died at a very young age because of not knowing that information. And I had to have surgery and at about the age of 7 or 8 years old. And so I think that if each person, that's the one thing is for me to help them identify those 1 or 2 things. And it starts with food because it's the low hanging fruit in the room. It's, and it may be identified through their case history. It may be identified through some naturopathic testing of some kind or some lab testing. It's like each person can pick their favorite thing, their favorite way to do it.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, there is no kind of, you never take a broad stroke to anybody and say that you would benefit from, eating 12 servings of fruits and vegetables or something, or, you would benefit from, 30 minutes of cardiovascular exercise. Are there anything that kind of holds true that you see across the board?
I do some of that for sure. And I'm a really avid reader. I read voraciously. And I've probably read most of the new functional medicine books that were published this year. And if you get into them and read, each one, the second half, each one pretty much says the same thing. They all say take your probiotics, have lots of dark leafy greens, get some omega-3s, reduce your exposure to electricity and light from your phone, have good sleep hygiene, do some hydrotherapy, do some cardiovascular workouts, some exercise. They all pretty much say the same thing, and they all cite the same studies. Whether you're reading Terry Wall's book on curing multiple sclerosis, whether you're reading Isabella Wentz's book on Hashimoto's thyroiditis, whether you're reading Ben Lynch's new book, Dirty Genes. I've read them all, and they're great books. I love them, but they're all pretty much agreeing on the same things, saying the same things. If you listen to Bulletproof Radio, Dave Asprey, all the people he has on, he's great. They're kind of saying the same things, and it's everything you and I studied at school that we've been known for a long time. So
do you see those things that are being said across the board? Do you think that they are in fact true and important for people?
In general, yes. However, it's a little bit of a tricky, slippery slope at times. I mean, for example, take fish oil. Everyone might be oh yeah, taking a couple thousand milligrams of fish oil is a good thing to do each day. But then you got to know where to source it. And there's been a lot of fish oils on the shelf that have been identified as oxidizing and producing inflammation in the body. So you might end up poisoning yourself if you don't get the right fish oil. Take probiotics. A lot of probiotics contain dairy, even though they say they don't. Wow. And so if you have any kind of dairy intolerance or dairy allergy, it's going to affect you. And so you got to know which ones are dairy-free, even though they say they're dairy-free. And so I think it's a slippery slope. And so everyone's got their trusted products and everyone's got a protocol, right? The Ben Alter protocol or the Ben Reebs protocol, right?
Yeah.
See, I can also get a little bit cynical too at times, like you're saying.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So it's not as easy as the books might lead us to believe sometimes. The books are great because they are painting these broad strokes, and they're generally enlightening and pointing us in the right direction. But ultimately, when it gets down to each individual case, you still have to kind of point people in a very specific direction, if I'm hearing you correctly. And I agree. With one kind of caveat. I think that everybody would benefit from much more fiber in their diet. And I don't think that, in my opinion, people aren't really talking about fiber enough. It's always where's your protein? Where are you getting, this fat, that fat, these carbs, those carbs? But really, 90-something% of the world our world, the Western world, is deficient in fiber. So usually increasing fruits and vegetables is one kind of recommendation that I can confidently, make for each individual, for everybody. But yeah, what,
Absolutely.
you on board?
I'm totally on board. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. But really, I do really value and appreciate the individualized. It's funny because I'm like putting you on the spot and like, answer this question. What do you do? What would you recommend for everybody? But I really appreciate how you can't do that. Like, you can't, in your integrity, say that everyone should do this, because you don't know everybody, and you really see the value of diving into each individual and making really specific recommendations, which I think is totally important. And you can't get that in any book, right? Unless you're writing a book for that person.
That's right. And I mean, even taking like fiber, we think of like oats and, I mean, there's a lot of things, certain cereals as having lots of fiber, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, gosh, I mean, people need to research what are the healthy sources of fiber. You mentioned fruits and vegetables. I mean, those are the best, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, but I think it's awesome once again that you're really staying true to the individualized medicine. So I really want to like get one thing out of you. If you could encapsulate either like an herb or a nutrient or a vitamin or a mineral or even anything else in quantum or thought or belief world, if you could encapsulate anything and give it to everybody and say, take this daily, what would that be?
For me right now at my stage of evolution, it would be trace minerals. And particularly the type derived from organic prehistoric shale or bedrock, basically prehistoric plant materials in liquid form. I love them in liquid form. Like I do trace minerals research. They've got a couple of great products, concentrates or ionic plant derived minerals. And I see incredible results with my patients on these. And the reason is that our vegetables and fruits don't contain nearly the amount of minerals they used to, right? And
the earth isn't the same as it used to be. Yeah.
I mean, you get a purple carrot from the farmer's market here in Portland, and it still doesn't contain nearly the amount of chromium that purple carrot would have contained 60 or 70 years ago in this country. Like it's literally like 1/700th. Like they've measured this.
Wow.
And they've measured our own blood. Our blood only has like a fraction of the chromium that it once did 60, 70 years ago. Is there any accident that we have an epidemic of diabetes in this country when chromium is the requisite cofactor mineral for insulin regulation?
Yeah. Well, I mean, absolutely. Chromium deficiency coupled with, diet of today. Absolutely. It's like the perfect storm, which we're in the midst of, right? Super cool. Anything else besides minerals?
I am a huge fan of digestive bitters. I mean, whether it's from your salad like fennel and some bitter plants, or whether it's like gentian or skullcap or particularly I like gentian and skullcap together because they have a kind of a synergistic effect together. And I like to get the wise women herbals, gentian and skullcap digestive caps, and it basically turns on digestion in my patients so they can absorb more nutrients. And then the skull cap is very soothing and anti-inflammatory to the gut. And so it kind of calms down everything, and then it helps them. Not only are they getting more minerals and they're getting more nutrients from their food, but then healing is also occurring in their gut. And their flora gets more healthy. So yeah, I think digestive bitters would be a second one.
Cool.
And it doesn't really matter which ones you use. You can pick your favorite one,
Right. What I learned, whatever kind of makes your mouth salivate, right? Kind of whatever you feel is kind of the astringent, like awakening the digestion. All right, cool. I'm glad I milked you for a couple of pearls that would be could be implemented across the board. So those are great ones. I love the idea that's kind of held true in naturopathic medicine of healing the gut and healing the tube that runs through us. And I like where you're coming at from the starting the digestive process with the bitters, because if you don't start it, then like what good is probiotics going to do? Or what good are you got to kind of go, from your mouth downward. You got to go in this direction, start the acid production, start the enzymes, and then, maybe worry about eating probiotic foods or something like that. Cool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what's the point of dumping a bunch of expensive supplements down my gullet if I'm not able to absorb them? And we see this a lot, even in our own medicine, where patients are put on $400 or $500 worth of supplements, but the doctor didn't optimize their gut first.
Right. So I'm curious what you do, Dr. Ben, when someone comes in with their grocery bag full of supplements. How do you approach that? Obviously, you got to know what each one of those supplements are, but in general, like, I don't know if there's any statistics, but it seems as though most people who seek out a naturopathic doctor are on at least 8, 10, 12 supplements already. And then sometimes more are thrown on without really taking them away. And then after 5 or 10 years, people get to, later in their life and they say, oh, I've been taking this for years, not really sure what it's for, but I've been taking it. So how do you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, I have to meet every patient where they're at. And some patients, they just spend a bunch of money on some supplements that they really treasure, or that they really value, and maybe it was recommended by a dear friend of theirs, or another, they heard about that. And if it's not going to harm them, like, I'll just say, yeah, go ahead and finish this, don't waste your money. Like, it's going to, and I maybe educate them a little bit about what it might do for them. Sometimes I'm taking people off supplements though, particularly if it's contraindicated to their case. Or if they're not absorbing at all, I'll be like, let's just save this until later. Because if you're not absorbing anything, let's just hang on to it for a month or two and let's get you going.
Sure. Yeah. I often have the inclination that oftentimes supplements are actually exacerbating issues. Just the sheer load of excess material that is kind of to some degree foreign to the body, overwhelming the system. Do you have any experience with that yourself?
I do, and I think more often though, I see my patients stressed out by the regimen of having to take all these supplements.
Yeah.
It literally is causing their cortisol to go up. And here they're taking supplements for cortisol regulation, but they're on this like rigorous schedule where they're taking 3 or 4 supplements at breakfast, 3 or 4 at lunch, 3 or 4 at dinner, and then a couple in between.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, let's calm this down a bit. Let's figure out what are the lowest common denominators here. What are the 2 or 3 or 4 things that you absolutely need?
Yeah.
But I haven't seen that. So, I mean, I'm a pretty new doc. I haven't seen that so much yet where people are actually getting sick from all the supplements they're taking, but I know that that's happening.
Sure.
For some.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say what's keeping people sick, but oftentimes people are, have significant hurdles, and it's interesting to think that the hurdles might be the medicine. It's kind of been like this shift in perspective to me, because I've personally been struggling a little bit myself at kind of finding the confidence because I feel very confident in the simplicity of natural vitalistic medicine, less is more thinking, this kind of alternative model that we've been kind of talking about. I feel very confident in it, but oftentimes, we're talking about meeting the patient where they're at, meeting the person where they're at. And oftentimes they're in the framework of thinking that I need a capsule to swallow to feel better. So I'm personally trying to figure out how to navigate this world of sharing my confidence and intention to support people in choosing to minimize and simplify their health regime rather than adding to it. And sometimes, I don't know if you could say anything to this, but like, people need to take a supplement to feel better. There's just that mindset. If I'm going to send someone home without anything, they're like, but what do I do? Well, you do these things what we talked about, and you do them with your whole heart and your intention, and you know, take care of yourself on that kind of easy, simple, straightforward way. You don't need to swallow anything. But what do you think, Dr. Ben?
Wow. Well, one thing that I've had to, for me, I've realized that I'm not the right doctor for everyone, right? Obviously. Yeah. And some people really need a doctor who's going to give them a ton of supplements. And those aren't my people. And they may go work with another doctor who puts them on a ton of supplements, and they may get better because that's what they need. And so, I think that's been really a big lesson for me because I'm kind of branching out a little bit, and because I'm a dyed-in-the-wool vitalist. I mean, like,
say that again.
I'm a dyed-in-the-wool vitalist. You know,
dyed-in-the-wool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, and I think it's because of my upbringing and living at Esalen and being raised in the woods and just all the things I've read and it just comes naturally to me. And some other people may not, resonate with that quite as much, or it may take more time for them. So it's like I have to meet them where they're at. I know I'm not really answering your question, but
you are, and thank you for that, because I think that's a really important message for myself to really bite into and grasp, and I think probably a lot of people to know that not everybody is for everybody, and there's this magical synergy that I like to believe that exists between, doctor and client, doctor, patient and doctor. And obviously that's a huge focus of, our education is this doctor-patient relationship. And it's something that can't be measured and studied, so to speak, very closely. But when it comes down to it, there's a perfect match for each individual. And I sometimes try to speak the language that other people want to hear in order to kind of like smooth the waters and kind of I try to build this bridge and meet people where they're at. But when it comes down to it, and if I'm hearing you correctly, some people are not to be met in that sort of relationship, and the relationship that best serves them might be with another doctor who likes to give supplements, or and they work because that person is invested in that way of approaching their health and healing. So it just speaks to a couple of things. It speaks to the power of intention and the power of thought when it comes to someone's healing process, and also to the fact of the matter that one person can't heal everybody, or not that any healing is done by the person, but one person can't facilitate the healing in everybody. It's just an highly individualized thing, which has been the theme of this conversation: individuality.
Yeah, and you kind of just inspired me to the idea that even the allopathic model may heal someone if that person has intentionality. For example, let's say a diabetic is taking a really low dose of metformin, and maybe they're in the pre-diabetic stage, and they're taking just a really small dose of metformin. And because they believe so strongly in their doctor or in that medicine, or they're coming at it with that intention, who am I to say that they may not heal it?
Totally.
It may happen. And one thing I love doing at NCNM or NUNM, where we both went to school, when you call in a tincture, they allow you to name it. So I name it for every patient, because so I'll be like happy thyroid tincture, or happy ovarian tincture, or whatever. And because I want to plant a seed, and when they see that bottle, I want them to see that those positive words. Mm-hmm. And I know some people might say, oh, that's placebo, blah, blah, blah.
Yes,
but
damn right it is.
If it's going to help them get better,
yeah,
sure.
Yeah, placebo works half the time. Why not use that? I mean, shoot, placebo is powerful medicine, and it sounds kind of funny, but yeah, is there anything else that you do to kind of invigorate a placebo effect. And not that I'm wanting, like, I know it's more than that, but really what I'm asking is there anything else that you do to kind of initiate a person's kind of intention in their healing process?
Yeah. For lack of a better term, listening. And I'm trained in hypnotherapy. I'm actually a certified hypnotherapist. And, you know, other people call it NLP or neuro-linguistic programming. It's what you study in psychology. It's what salespeople study. But really, like, all of that aside, it's just really good listening. And so the way I build a rapport with my patient is by listening to the words they use and then mirroring them back to them in an authentic way. I mean, obviously, I'm not there to sell them so much as more to, like, help meet their needs and their intention and figure out what help them as a collaborator in their goals as a patient. And so if they use lots of visual terminology, I'll mirror back with visual words. If they use lots of auditory words, like, I'll mirror back in auditory words. And then that will build more of a rapport, and that will facilitate a greater chance of success.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I'm right there with you. And I think that's really what it comes down to is just holding somebody in the perfect place for them to experience exactly what they need from that person in that magical moment. And all the, you know, I love the example that you gave earlier about the trace minerals and the cervical adjustment and the homeopathic. And I just had this picture of just this kind of magician, even though it's not really magic, but it might be, like, you know, if you want to call it magic, why not? But it's all, I've loved this conversation because it's all so highly specialized and individualized. I think I've said that word like 90 times in the last hour. Individualization.
Well, it kind of comes back to the wave and the snowflake, right? I mean, there's no two snowflakes are the same. And the snowflake is really just a frozen wave of water. And that's how each person is. And so that's more of a quantum approach. It's more of a treat the whole person. And the word heal comes from the old German for to restore health or to treat the whole, right? Like heal, heil, whole. I mean, I know that, you know, obviously we know the Heil Hitler in Nazi Germany, but heal, it comes from that word whole, to make whole. And that really comes with treating the whole person on all levels. And that means that that everything in the person is connected. Literally, like if they have a migraine headache on the left side and they've got diverticulitis that flares up at night, and they've got, a gluten allergy, and maybe they have plantar fasciitis on the left foot. Like all of those things may be or probably connected. And so I could treat each of those things, and I do. But I also can treat the whole person. Maybe there's a thing that unites those, or two or three of those things that are united by one modality.
Totally. Love it. I'm right there with you. And is there any kind of final words of wisdom or advice maybe geared towards somebody who is choosing into a vital lifestyle, a healthy way of living, without giving, of course, because everyone, deserves their individualized recommendations, but any sort of words of encouragement maybe they would be?
Well, I mean, this is going to sound really cliche, but I'd say that there is hope. No matter where a person's at. I mean, I recently had like a stage 4 breast cancer patient, and she was 2 or 3 weeks from death, and I still treated her with a hopeful intention, and it helped her get more energy, and it helped her have more quality time with her family. And so no matter where a person's at, there is hope. And I also think on top of that, I would say that really what we eat and it affects us in the biggest way. I mean, food really is our medicine. And if people can just make a couple of little changes with what they eat, it's going to have a huge impact. I think that, we are what we eat, and we are what we ate. So, really, and literally food turns on and off our genes. It turns on and off our cancer genes, our oncogenes. It turns on and off our inflammatory response. It turns on and off our neurotransmitter production and lack thereof. It turns on and off our happiness, our mood, our everything. And so, it's inexpensive, really. As Americans, what percentage do we spend on food, like of our income? It's like 5% or something. Whereas in Germany or in Europe, it's like 20% of their income is spent on food. Or I want to say it's 2 or 3 times as high as what we spend. We think food's really expensive in this country, but relative to other places, it's not. And you can make your own garden. You can buy a few things that aren't that expensive and cook a little bit. So I think, I know it sounds, everyone's saying eat good food, but eat real food.
It can't be overstated.
No.
You can't overstate the obvious. And at the same time, I think that everyone is still digesting those words. And I think collectively, we're kind of seeing the change. And I know sometimes I feel like I'm an impatient sort of person. So I'm like, all right, guys, let's do it now. Let's do it yesterday. But sometimes it's just like, all right, nature's pace, the divine timing, and trusting. So Dr. Ben, any way that people can connect with you online, social media, website stuff?
Yeah, you can go to drreebs.com. That's D as in doctor, double R, double E, B as in boy, S as in Sam.com. Or you can find me on Instagram or on Facebook.
Yeah. Are you at Dr. Reebs? I forgot.
On Facebook, I am at Ben Reebs.
At Ben Reebs.
Yep. At Ben Reebs.
And Instagram as well?
Instagram as well. Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, at Ben Reebs, it's been a pleasure. And thank you, man. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Peace and love. And until next time.